So a budget fight happens in Washington, D.C., and suddenly thousands of flights are just canceled. How does a political stalemate lead directly to complete chaos at the airport? Well, in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how that happens. And look, this isn't some exaggeration for the cameras. That's a direct warning from the U.S. Transportation Secretary. I mean, when the person in charge of the entire system says it's on the brink of being reduced to a trickle, you know things are getting serious. So what does a trickle actually look like in the real world? Well, it looks like this. Over 2,500 flights canceled in a single weekend. And this isn't a prediction, right? This is the real immediate fallout when the system just buckles under the strain. All right, so how does a shutdown actually end up grounding thousands of flights? Let's dig in. And this really is the central question, isn't it? It seems so disconnected, a funding debate on Capitol Hill, and suddenly your flight from Chicago to Dallas is just gone. But believe me, there is a direct line connecting those two things, and it runs right through the very people who keep our skies safe. Okay, so here's the absolute core of the problem. Your air traffic controllers, your TSA officers, they're all federal employees. Now, during a shutdown, they're considered essential, so they have to work, but they don't get paid. And when people in super high-stress jobs suddenly stop getting paid, what happens? Well, a lot of them just can't show up to work. Absenteeism skyrockets. And that, of course, creates these massive staffing shortages, slowing the entire system to a crawl, all while crucial background work like safety inspections and modernization just grinds to a halt. Okay, so let's look at how a problem like this spirals into a full-blown crisis. Because, this kind of chaos doesn't just happen overnight. You can really see how this thing snowballs right here on this timeline. As the shutdown just drags on and on, the stress on the system becomes a major safety risk. With fewer controllers and agents on duty, the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, is forced to act. So they have to order airlines to start cutting flights, first by 4%, then it jumps to 10%. They're basically shrinking the whole system on purpose, just to match their dwindling workforce and, hopefully prevent a catastrophe. Okay, now we get to the really wild part of this whole situation. The fact that some people are forced to work without a paycheck. I mean, how is that even legal, right? It all comes down to some very specific, kind of weird government procedures. Well, the official government speak for a shutdown is a lapse in appropriations. What that really means is that the legal authority to spend money has just expired. Because of a law called the Anti-Deficiency Act, federal agencies have to shut down pretty much everything. But, and this is a big but, there are a few critical exceptions. So this whole decision-making process, it's not random. It literally follows a flowchart, just like this one. Once the funding dries up, the one question that matters is, does your job fall into what they call an accepted category? Your answer determines whether you're sent home or you have to keep showing up to work. So this breaks down the two different paths for federal workers. If your job is considered non-essential, you get furloughed. That means you're sent home, you're not allowed to work, and you're not getting paid. But if your job is all about the safety of human life or the protection of property, then you are considered accepted. You are legally required to work, but here's the kicker. You won't see a dime until the shutdown is finally over. And guess who falls squarely into this critical but unpaid category? Yep, our air traffic controllers and TSA agents. And, the impact here goes way beyond just being annoyed at the airport. This thing creates massive economic turbulence that ripples out way, way beyond the travel industry itself. Just take a look at this number. $140 million. That's the estimated loss to the U.S. travel industry every single day the shutdown drags on. It is an economic bleed that just adds up at a totally staggering rate. And when you break that number down, you really see how widespread the pain is. Sure, air travel itself loses over $16 million a day. But look at this. The biggest hit actually comes from attraction closures. We're talking national parks, museums, and the complete stop of all official government travel. But it's also important to point out that not everyone in the industry feels the same immediate pain. This quote from a government contractor on Reddit really highlights a key difference. See, a lot of those big defense and aerospace contracts, they're funded way in advance. So those private sector employees can often just keep working and getting paid like normal, at least for a while. It's a really stark contrast to their federal counterparts. So, all of this chaos, all this economic damage, well, it's not surprising that it's sparked a much, much bigger debate. is there a way to stop this from ever happening again? So, is there a different flight path we could take? Is it possible to redesign the system so that our critical travel infrastructure is insulated from the political drama in Washington? And some folks think the answer is a definite yes. And this quote right here, it gets straight to the heart of a major reform proposal. The argument is that air traffic control is basically a high-tech service industry, and maybe, just maybe, it doesn't belong inside a government bureaucracy that can be shut down on a whim. So here's what that alternative actually looks like. Taking air traffic control completely out of the FAA and putting it into an independent, nonprofit organization. It would be funded directly by user fees from the airlines themselves, not from Congress. That would completely insulate it from these government shutdowns. And hey, this isn't some crazy, untested idea. 98 other countries, including our neighbors in Canada, already run things this way. Now, this whole debate is also fueled by a deep frustration with how the current system is performing. Critics love to point to the FAA's huge next-gen modernization program. After 2 decades and $36 billion, government auditors found it's delivered only 16% of its promised benefits. I mean, that just adds fuel to the fire for people arguing that the government bureaucracy is just too slow and clunky to innovate. And all of this brings us to the final big question. Do we just accept airport chaos as this unfortunate but unavoidable side effect of politics? Or is this constant threat of a shutdown a clear sign that the fundamental way we manage our skies is broken and that it's ready for a major overhaul? That's a debate about the very foundation of our national air system, and it's one that you can be sure will continue long after the planes are all flying again.